We have on the agenda some quick AmeriCorps updates. I'll just kind of give like the status of general things happening in our world with AmeriCorps and the commission and whatnot. Little bit of update on state legislature and so forth, which should be hitting sine die, like I think like the end of this week or Monday. Ending here soon, wrapping up the long session. And then a little bit about recruitment updates. Not a little bit, we've got about 20 minutes on there. And then some operational tools discussion, and then we'll go ahead and kind of wrap up the meeting to end at 12. So just to get started, we don't have any public comments, do we, Kelly?
No, we don't have any public comment.
I want to talk a little bit about that someday. I don't know if I have time today, but a little bit about like, we learned recently you don't have to allow public comments in every meeting. You just have to allow like participate, like observation, not participation, which kind of blew my mind because I always thought it was participation. And I have some thoughts around like what makes sense for that to like apply to different meetings and stuff. I think we should talk about someday. But not to get into that now. What I want to jump into really quick is just the AmeriCorps updates. As of right now, we have received our funding for the next year for the commission itself, which was exciting, which means they're actually allocating out the 2025 appropriations that were approved in March. And so we've gotten that for our commission support grant. So I'm not getting immediately laid off like I was a little worried about there, whether that funding was going to come in or not. I'm still doing some succession planning just in case because it's an unpredictable world. But we haven't received our KIF grant. We are aware that there's internal approval issues occurring with the OMB for AmeriCorps to issue that, which is concerning. That's a pretty big grant, not as big as commission support, and it doesn't require a match like the commission support one does. And for clarity, these are just, I'm just now only talking about our staff, operational grants right now, not the ones that go out to grantees. But that KIF grant is the funding that we use to actually like, host meetings, hire speakers, have events for the commission board and the grantees and program directors. And it funds, our recruitment and a lot of our communications and different stuff like that. So, our staff travel, our grantee travel for trainings and whatnot. So hoping to see that obviously clear whatever barriers or hurdles it's facing internally. If there's any, I guess, issue that comes up with that not being issued out or somehow canceled, or what is it called? Is it impounded? I have to look that word up again. Is that what it is, right?
I learned that term this morning on LinkedIn, impounded.
Did you learn it from
Yeah.
Shannon's post about, did you learn
Probably.
it from her post? Yeah. The really the long post that probably somebody we have in common in the network posted around what's happening with the competitive grants receiving the if
Yeah.
funding. Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And so that's essentially where funding has been approved, but the administration is essentially withholding it. It's sort of a backdoor way to not follow up on that. Anywho, so if that were to happen, just as an FYI, and I know we'll hear more about this in updates in our full commission meetings, but Ask is actually engaging in some private funding grant applications, and we're looking for soliciting just different private grants and funders that would be interested in providing some essential replacement grants to commissions and whatnot, without a requirement, and Ask would essentially issue those without a requirement to pay back. So they're doing some mitigation planning, so that's interesting. I'll keep you updated. As far as the money that's going out, the funding that's going out to the grantees, we submitted our formula grants on the 5th, I guess that was, or I'm sorry, on the 13th of June, for the first deadline, with, the hope that even though that's a late date, submitting it on that date as opposed to the July 11th, which was the other option, submitting it on that one, it's still a later start, but hopefully not going to have too much of a negative impact on programs and having a late start, and they can work that out with any promised service sites and start date expectations. So we've submitted that, and we'll be doing probably an amendment later, based on our competitive results. But what we're seeing is that we've heard that national directs have been getting their 2025 grants and continuations. We're seeing that various like seniors programs and vistas and so forth are. So we know that AmeriCorps is operating with the idea that, yeah, like 2025 funding is available and moving forward. Just as a reminder, when you hear us talk about budgets being zeroed out and different things like that, they're actually talking about the 2026 budget that would then impact next year's program. So as far as that all seems to be moving forward. The other positive thing to report is that we did this past I guess it was 2 Fridays ago actually. um this is on the 5th. We received notice that the preliminary injunction that had been requested by the 25 attorney generals, of which Oregon is part of that multi-state lawsuit, that request for preliminary injunction against the termination of 2024 AmeriCorps grants and the NCCC dismantling and the RIF and all of that had come through and was successful. So AmeriCorps has been ordered, and while this case is pending, to restore those grants to status quo. The court did not include the RIF, the reduction in force issue within this. They didn't feel like that was part of the purview of these states and whatnot. Like that's not your business. That's federal staffing business essentially. So the injunction didn't affect that. And there are some other like ACL AFL-CIO lawsuits and others that are addressing that. But as of right now, they did order that the grants that were terminated be restored to status quo. So we're working on getting that implemented. The procedures, the policies, the online systems that need to be like updated and amended and put in place for us to be able to bring back, suspended or exited members to, address the different costs and so forth, closeout versus program cost, Those are the purview of AmeriCorps. And so we are waiting to hear from them on how to do these things. We can't do it without those instructions. And so the status report that they had due in just this past Friday did acknowledge that they should be giving those instructions this coming Friday. So we're hoping to see that happen soon. And in that case, that'd be great where members would be able to come on and get those hours that they didn't get a chance to complete, be able to put more hours towards their education award that right now is, prorated and things like that. So that's kind of the state of things. We're excited about that, but also like, please hurry up and get us this info. Time is ticking. It's been a couple of weeks, and a concern would be are not, the nonprofits and the different grantees of all these programs and triples, well, not NCCC, but Vista, all of that. The staff have been laid off, or the staff are not accessible, or the members, aren't able to do that anymore, or the service sites where they serve those projects are closed, or things like that. But so we're doing a lot of advocacy on, nationally with our association, working with legal and so forth to to make sure that this is gonna hurry up and get in place. That's about it as far as AmeriCorps, I think, to share. I do think, there's still that like kind of hit to the confidence and like, well, do I sign back up and then will this happen again? A rug be pulled out from under me. But I do think that the courts saying like, hey, this was not cool, and this lawsuit and all the many other lawsuits having this type of success, I think, kind of will help restore that a little bit. So grateful for that. As far as state activities, as of right now, where we're really focusing, like our National Governors Association Policy Academy is on the Youth Mental Health Corps grant that we got, especially looking at how we would still ensure that happened in case any federal funding did go away. We know that we have $500,000 in a private grant to be able to institute at least a state corps. So we're looking at ways to sort of like have some backup plans for that. Nothing to report as far as the state legislature because none of our concepts moved forward. And so unfortunately, however, lots already being talked about for next time, because of the fact that, believe it or not, for the next long session, which is 2027, those concepts are due internally in all the state agencies around like September or October of this year. Because it starts landing, leading up to like all of the processes and state deadlines and Department of Admin Services deadlines for next year. So expect to hear, a lot of talk about that in the full commission meeting. And as I said, I expect that the legislature should probably close on Friday, if not Monday. it'll be the end of this session. Then if you're not fully familiar with it, but I think you both are very seasoned on this and already know, the next year is in short session, which is like mainly technical, but it's not where you're asking really for like big concepts or positions or things like that. All right, I did that with 2 minutes to spare. Any questions? Sound good? All right, recruitment updates. So I kind of backing into that, you should have gotten an email invite from me for a Google Docs folder. And that, whoa, it's a little wobbly. Is where I have put a bunch of different things for you for review. This is a little bit of a do-over to last meeting because with all the lawsuit stuff and all that going on, I didn't meet some of the deadlines I talked about of wanting to get some documents out to you all. So this is a little bit of a do-over there. But within that folder, you'll see that there's a bunch of things that I've put draft at the beginning of the document to specify what those are. But then I've also included a document on the appointments timeline, draft email like recruitment message, and we've got the matrix or the roster to look at and so forth. Let me do a little bit of screen sharing here. Oh, Kelly, you have to turn it on for me.
Were you able to get it?
Let me try again. Okay, you should be seeing this appointments timeline, Doc. So this is the upcoming appointments timeline for appointments for the governor appointed boards and commissions. The way that this works is that we get these notices from the Office of Appointments kind of a little bit out of the blue from when they hear from the legislature of when they'll hear these, because it is an actual like hearing where there's a committee and they run through all the different appointments and vote and whatnot. So for this upcoming session, or for these upcoming appointments, they had thought that September was the only one, and that the deadline was in June. They did just let us know that they've updated it to July 7th, which is great. So that's a couple of weeks from now. That is essentially the way this works, is that the applications are due by July 7th. That means that they're due by applicants into the boards and commissions application website, into their application form, which is essentially putting them into Workday. So that's not into us. They have to actually apply into that system on Workday. Then the next date you see, the July 14th, that's where I have a deadline of July 14th to let my advisor at the Office of Appointments, which is Maya, the leader of the director of that office, to let her know which ones I, would want to move forward. And so I would review those, do interviews, and then let her know which ones to move forward. And then the third bullet point is saying when Maya's deadline is to then to the exec team say these are the ones we're moving forward, and then they essentially do their background checks and other internal checks that they have to do, and then those go forward to I guess the Senate committee legislative analyst. And then we just got notice last week that, which makes me very, very happy, that they are going to do a second round. So it was the case that they thought they were only going to hear these in September, which would have meant, waiting again to like February or March or something. But they've let us know, let all of the boards and commissions know that there is going to be a November appointment. And so those applications will be due by September 5th. then my due date would be September 15th to let them know which ones I would want to have move forward. And then they'll have September 25th to do that. So it's a pretty, they do almost like I think like 6 weeks lead in to the actual hearing a lot of times. And like I said, sometimes we don't get a ton of notice, but I'm glad that they've been given decent notice for this one and let us know about the second one. Cause sometimes it's like, hey, next week these are due. And, we just found out. And so this is great that there is this kind of two waves of this, because I think we're gonna need it to kind of hit our goals on that. Are there any questions about that? I'm gonna actually share my whole thing so that I can show you all more than just one tab. Hold on. Okay. Sorry that you also see yourself in this, but so the other thing then that I wanted to just talk about with that was how that impacts recruitment. And I had shared that I would show you kind of where we're at with recruitment. So I've updated a specific like roster just to kind of show you all that. So this is our current roster in the positions that we have. So we have Greg, Jared, you, Carrie, you, Craig, Latrissa, Dr. Latrissa, Susan, Shanika, Daniel, Heidi, June, and Sierra. And these are essentially their expiration dates. So we've got a lot of people that are, hanging around for a while through 2027, which is great. Then we've got a couple of people that their expiration is actually coming up this November. And then you've got Heidi, who she has her term actually expired in May, and it was her second one of last year. But that's a really hard position to fill that we've had struggles to fill, and we are allowed to keep someone in a position until we have the position filled for a reasonable amount of time. And Heidi agreed to stay in until we could find her replacement. We also at the time needed an experienced chair, and Heidi was of the people that we talked to available, and had a lot of experience and hadn't chaired before, so that was a great compromise for us to in situation for her where she knows that she's kind of helping fill this time, but we're aware that we can't take advantage of that forever. We do, need to find someone to backfill her. So these are what I would consider, I would consider that a critical need for her. And that's what this column is over here, is acknowledging that. And the reason why I have that is because if you look at role over here, not every role is actually a required role. Greg, Jared, Carrie, Daniel, Heidi, June are in required roles. And then these are the other required roles. So there's an individual with experience in educational training and development needs of youth, particularly disadvantaged youth. There's a deputy or superintendent of public instruction or design or designee, a representative of local government, representative of business, and an individual between 16 and 25 years of age. It says who is a participant in or supervisor of a service program for school-age youth or campus-based national service program. But what has happened is when we have had actual members try to apply that meet that definition, they've said that's actually not allowed, and they apply the VISTA and the Hatch Act that VISTA that typically only applies VISTA to all of it. This was actually a discussion we had with AmeriCorps Legal. So we have filled this with alumni or like a volunteer program and not necessarily like an AmeriCorps program. And so those are the required roles. The statute says these are the very specific roles that have to exist on a commission. But then it also says these are the other types of things that you can fill your positions. You can designated slots on your commission, because the minimum required membership for the commission to be in compliance is 15. You can have minimum 15 up to 25. We've kind of said the anecdote, casually that 20 is probably a sweet spot, but which is why I wrote that there. But it says here are some other roles that would be suggested outside of the required ones to meet that 20. And so that is things like this experts in the delivery of human educational, environmental, or public safety. Um, Same here. That's what most of them are filling. Educators, including representatives of post-secondary education. These are all descriptions that are suggested in our state and in federal statute, but they're not part of the required roles. And so we've also got, so I just have made slots for them essentially and designated them with the Office of Appointments on our, you know, the roster that they keep of openings, and how they designate roles. Members or representatives of Native American tribes, at-risk or out-of-school youths, entities that receive assistance under the DVSA Act, and then I think I just stuck another one in there to have a duplicate because we already have quite a few of these experts in the delivery. And so essentially what is happening right now is that we have a special condition on our commission support grant because I don't have all the required roles filled, and we're at 11 members right now. There's also usually an ex officio member here, so we would be up to have a higher number, but that is a required ex officio role for an AmeriCorps representative, which was Mary Grusel from the West Region office, and Mary is part of the reduction in force impacts. And so that across the nation, like no one has that role filled, but that's where you would normally see that additional person. So that is why I've marked the required ones that are both like coming up as expirations or that are unfilled as our critical ones. Um, so that's kind of where that stands right now. I just want to really quick see if there's any questions about that.
I don't have a question, Carrie, but depending on how recruitment goes, I think I would also qualify for number 14, a representative of local government, because we are tax-based funded. We
Yeah.
are technically local government. So if you found someone else to be up in the number 2 slot,
Yeah.
you could move me down to number 14.
Oh yeah, sure. Um, for which one? For which role do you play again?
So I'm employed by a local soil and water conservation district. So
In
we're a
that
unit of local government.
Okay,
We
cool.
have a local tax base.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, we almost had CM too like move because remember she had been recruited. She was an educator and then later was like, "Oh, by the way, I'm also like a Tillamook County City Council member." And I'm like, she's like, I just got elected. I'm like, that would have been good to put you in as a local government. But then she had to leave the commission. But yeah, in some of these, a lot of people actually do count as a few different things. But when we do that, we don't have the numbers. If we're like, oh, you fill 3 different slots, then like that's less people. So I'm trying to think of it less of that, but we can always move people and then like have someone else because like in this case, we do have 2 people that are representative community-based organizations. I mean, technically Greg could say that too, right? But we've got him as national service. But that's good to know if we want to change that. So yeah, and then what I've also done on this is just marked like the regions that people belong to. And then we have a restriction on that we can only have, I think it's something like 25% of our roster can be state employees. And so I just have something marked here that Shanika is a state employee. And then Nathan had been as well before he moved to New York and had to leave the commission. He worked for OLCC and DHS and then OLCC. So we've always kind of stayed under that. And right now we just have Shanika as that person. And I know that these 2 will stay, on as requested, but they're not in required slots right now as well. And then the other thing, yeah, I don't have much else to share, but I thought this would be a good tracking document. So with that, I'll share that we I have about 5 applications submitted right now. Not any particular recruitment that I did, just, people hear about us or see my posts or just are looking to join a board or commission and they see us in the list and apply. A couple of them I'm not entirely sure about. I think um well, I'll tell you this in another thought I want to share about process, but a couple of them I'm not entirely sure about in their interest, and I would have to do some follow-up, but they're like medical personnel and very medical personnel based, and I think it might be a mistake. I think I'm very curious of whether or not they meant to join or they think that we're Serve Oregon. And so when we renamed the Commission for Oregon Volunteers, it's actually a naming convention to do like Serve Pennsylvania, or no, Pennsylvania serves one, like Serve Oregon, like Serve Washington, serve whatever the state is. And we specifically did not do Serve Or because the medical volunteer database for Oregon Health Authority is called Serve Oregon or Serve-OR. And so that's for medical volunteers during disaster response or emergency response. And so we thought we were avoiding this confusion, but I'm sort of wondering if that is part of the issue, because even if I search OregonServes on Google, I will get that Serve Oregon database as a response. And so I had to do some follow up with them and just be like, I'm not seeing the connection. Like, so I'm going to follow up with them and see if maybe that's what they actually thought they were applying to and then redirect them. But then I have a couple that do seem very interested in volunteer services. But it didn't stand out to me as anyone that particularly falls into any of our required slots. So I think that there's a pretty big need for recruitment. And then we've got 2 stages to recruit for. As I said, 2 phases, the ones that are due in a couple of weeks and the ones that are due in September. And so I am curious around what your thoughts are on kind of attacking this. I'll mention really fast too. I do have in here for people to use and edit it a little bit if you want to personalize it, just a starting draft for sending out to people. You know, your contact list, people you know specifically that you think would be a good fit. But just going back to this, in my opinion, the relationships and the outreach that take a while and would take a while, I would think, to um to make and to encourage to apply, or that I think wouldn't be something to be able to kind of, do some outreach and say, hey, apply in the next couple weeks or so. But that are more for November would be, in particular, the members or representatives of Native American tribes. That takes a lot of relationship building. I don't have really much tribal relationships, quite frankly, in the state. But I recognize that others do. Um, I think also this one I think requires, and this one requires some development from us before conducting outreach. And the reason being that we've talked about that for a teen or someone in those age ranges to serve is a pretty big commitment, and that it would make sense to have some sort of like structure in place for mentoring, like maybe it's a maybe it's 2 people. Maybe we're asking for an adult and the youth to serve together. The adult kind of having the step back, but being like part of that team to support them. And I think that's a bigger conversation, and probably we should hash out what that looks like before doing the outreach. What are your thoughts on that? And does anybody have experience with an underage youth, like serving?
I don't have any specific youths that come to mind, but there's a couple of organizations in Lane County that serve those populations, especially at-risk and out-of-school youths, around workforce development, career-connected learning, and that type of thing. And so I could ask colleagues about whether there would be any people in that they're currently working with that might be interested in learning more about this. Um, would that be helpful or appropriate to kind of
Yeah. Well,
invite?
I was thinking a little bit about like before maybe inviting applicants, I feel like do we need to maybe hash out or write out a little bit more of the member description, like the responsibilities or like the level of
Mhm,
support, or think about
right.
how we make sure they can serve. Like, how would we have a youth attend a Friday afternoon board meeting over lunch during a school year? Like, that stuff's confusing.
Right.
I feel like that's an additional conversation to kind of hash out and make sure we're like really intentional about that.
Yeah.
Do you
Makes
happen
sense.
to know anyone that has like a position like that and how they have maybe put that together?
Yeah, so in Lane County, we have a poverty and homelessness board that's associated with our county Health and Human Services Department, and they have a youth representative. So they have certainly thought about this situation before. So I could ask if they have any guidance or kind of best practices they've learned
Oh, I
over
love
time.
that. Yeah, that would be great. Is that something you could do by next meeting? Like just upload it or whatnot?
Yeah, sure.
Anything that they give you. So those, yeah, those are the ones that I think anything else standing out to anybody about what seems like is a very obvious, like more like a September goal. I mean, all of these, the backup would be September, but um
So I was just looking at the individual with experience in education, training, development for
mhm.
youth. I have a lot of friends and family that are school teachers. They're all retired, that are always looking for stuff to do and get very bored regularly.
In that field. Do you have
They're
anybody
retired
that
school teachers or administrators,
oh,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, if somebody very like in particular you think would meet that you have in mind, definitely. Maybe not a
Yeah, and
relative, but would that
uh
be weird?
um you don't live in Clackamas County if you think that's weird because we're all related here.
Are you
We are all related in some way, shape, or form, but
is
there's
that
one that's
true?
also the chair for a nonprofit. A lot of us, yeah. So Clackamas County. I mean, my husband works for the county. My uncle-in-law, my other uncle-in-law, my their dad, their mom, their
Oh,
sister.
wow.
I mean,
That's
it's
funny.
very small. You wouldn't think that, but it is
Yeah,
very
I
small. And
didn't think of it that way. Yeah, definitely. I trust, yeah, whoever you think yeah, might fit that. You'd be interested in forwarding that to both of you, it doing some thought around that. And also especially does that area kind of that's not considered Mount Hood Gore, the like Columbia Gorge area, but beyond it is, right?
beyond it is, yeah.
That is an area that a region, I have this just broken down by the different regions, not by like county or anything. If you know people that kind of extend out into that region, that would be great too. The other is representative local governments, representative business. That's one where I have thought about that it could be a good idea to maybe see if somebody from WTDB, the governor's like workforce development board, would be interested in potentially co-serving. So that's some outreach that I'm going to do there. Um, and then the other one, the entities that receive assistance under the DVSA, as I understand it, that's a basically like saying a Vista program in a really long way. So the domestic and yeah, the Domestic Volunteer Service Act essentially established Vista. In Oregon, that's a little difficult because Vista is actually really on the like decrease in Oregon. There's not a lot of projects. So that's one where you like potentially, I guess, like a Vista alum or something, but it'd be great and Vista program. But I'd have to look and see even who has a current Vista program. I'm not sure if anybody even does this year. But if not, that could go to Vista alum. So the ones that I am particularly focused on are going to be this deputy superintendent, and that's basically the Department of Education in the state, and this representative of business. But the other ones are all that, I would just ask if you do happen to have some good ideas for that. Right now, please go ahead and send out some outreach to your community. But I'm thinking, would it make sense for us to also do like a deeper dive on this for the September, like with a little bit more targeted discussion, targeted outreach? Kelly, when's our next meeting? This meeting?
One moment, please.
So all the older adult senior corps programs are also under the Domestic Volunteer Service Act.
But you're already our senior representative. Seniors program representative,
Yeah.
but then technically, yeah, that's interesting.
Just if you can't find anybody and you do need it, there's some more
It's
of
weird
us.
that it's kind of like, yeah, that it's almost like a duplicate request.
The next meeting is August 21st.
So next meeting is August 21st. That only gives a couple of weeks between when applications are due, so it's not a lot of time again. Thoughts on process for this beyond what I've mentioned? Or for this round, do we just maybe not have the time and we maybe would it make sense to use this document to maybe like for people to put in some names that they think like might meet this as far as, hey, this person's in business, or I know this person from that is a tribal representative in this area, da da da, da, or I don't know, Vista program in this region, something like that. You don't ever follow it.
That makes sense to me, to have some kind of ongoing list that us and potentially other commissioners could add people from our networks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about like I don't know necessarily thinking about geographic representation, and I know a lot of people in Lane County. I know fewer people over in Baker County or Burns. But I'm just thinking about general outreach for this opportunity, whether it would be helpful to think about kind of network organizations that have a statewide presence, like there are United Ways in
Mhm.
most communities in Oregon, and there might be an opportunity to like at least share a little bit about this opportunity through that
Mhm.
network. And the RARE program has a really robust alumni listserv, and so I was just thinking about whether it would be helpful to not like make a specific invitation to apply, but at least let people know about the opportunity through some of those
Yeah.
statewide networks.
Well, I would ask if you all would want to do some blanket just like outreach like that. I would super appreciate it. And then, you can put like even in your email that if you want to like adjust the one that or start with the draft that I put for there, reach out to me for more kind of specifics and
Sure.
follow-ups. That'd be great. I think where we also want to like right now, I think timing wise and just a small group, like I don't think there's as much time to kind of do as much of a like real intentional, like we need these skills in this area, da da da. But I'd like us to get there, but we just don't have, we're a newer little group. And so this is a little bit of a bliss to also kind of get into compliance and, bring on some more members as we go into these next projects. but I would like us to get and develop some processes for mapping skills and so forth. And I have a draft for that, but just, we don't have time today to do that. But, and then also think about what that process would look like how like when we get those, then what do I send them all out to you and we review them as a group, and then we score and rank them? Like, that's just some stuff to be developed that I think will have to kind of come around for one of our next rounds, but maybe we work on that for September for next year. Which is not far. Like, I mean, there'll be like just a few more months before there'll be appointments happening in February or not, and we'll probably have applications due in January. So maybe that is sort of the goal too, that I can throw some drafts together to kind of get talking on the process for this and how we want to do that for ranking and interviewing and stuff like that. But right now, the biggest help is just getting that I think I'm requesting, just getting that word out. So I'll put something together for people to like throw ideas to for me to do any follow up on. But yeah, if you want to do some blanket outreach too, that'd be great. I definitely appreciate it. I'll go ahead and move on really quick, just because of time. So I'm gonna drop off that. The other things I just wanted to share in here is just what I put together. So I had asked for one of the things for help with, and that we could have as a responsibility within this committee is just some review of some of the different drafts. And so I've got a few things in here. There is a training needs survey. And the way it'll look, if you already looked at it, is these are things that even if it was to go into a survey document, I just have it in a Word doc for now to show like what the actual questions would be. But this would go in like 365 forms or something. But this is just a training needs survey draft for the Oregon Service Commission. This is something that could be deployed to be able to just get a good idea of like what ongoing trainings, what might be part of onboarding. Ongoing trainings, ones that could also be part of onboarding, also ones that would identify like, hey, for the annual meeting, this is something that people would like training on. There's also in here a satisfaction survey. So this would be something to deploy to basically ask members, so how do you feel that we're doing? And how well are we filling their role, and how well are we supporting you as a commission member, and things like that. The other ones in here that we talked about are the charter for this committee. I think we went over it really quick before, but here's the actual document. These are not our actual fonts that we use, by the way, but that's what Google Docs uses. I can't share things through Teams in 365 except to other state employees, which is why I ended up uploading these to my kind of generic OregonServes Google Docs. This is an accessibility recommendations document. I consider this one to be one of the priorities. And then the other thing in here is the DEIA assessment. And so this is actually taken, most of this, and I've updated a little bit, but most of this is taken from a commission a DEIA assessment doc that's been around for years, that came, I think, originally through a contractor, through a like project through our national association or something. So it's pretty old and can probably be updated. I updated a little bit. But all of these documents are in here to essentially ask for your opinion and review. And I'll get to the other one that's kind of top priority, but this is these are drafts, these are starters, these are not final. So what I wanted to ask is that if you all could take a look at them and give your opinion. You can use track changes and rewrite. You can just put a comment in or make a suggestion. You could add sections. I think what we really want to get to is like some final drafts that we feel are good to move forward for approval, for implementation. And so definitely there might be some things in each of those that haven't been thought of that, if you see it, put it in there. Or if you're like, does this really apply to us? I mean, I think on some of the, like even on the DEIA assessment, there might be a few like that. So that's just kind of asking for your input so that we can move these further. The other document that's in here, and it's actually a 3-parter, is this policy proposal piece. And so this is, we know that the state of Oregon has a DEIA lens, we know the HAC has a DEIA lens, and that we essentially work under. And one of the ideas that had been talked about is that when OregonServes wants to implement a policy, there's certain ones that the commission has always said, we don't want to be in the weeds of like your operational admin stuff, but there's certain things that could have an impact that we would want to look at, and you would probably want us to look at for support of implementation, because maybe it is controversial, or maybe it is, would have a large impact and whatnot. And so we don't have currently any way for that to happen. We don't have guiding documents or questions that tell the OregonServes staff, when you want to submit a policy for approval, these are the things that you need to ask yourself, and that you need to do, and that you need to communicate. And so this first document is essentially asking them all of those types of questions about the policy. So this, I'm looking just for feedback on, like, does this make sense? Is this thorough? Is it too long? Should it be shortened? Should the questions be different? What really makes sense? And again, this isn't, we're trying to get it to kind of the final like proposal to put forward to the board, who might have a few more, suggestions too, but we're kind of trying to get it to a near final draft. And so this just goes through these questions. And again, this would be an OregonServe staff member filling this out and then submitting it to the board as part of their like agenda item docket for you all to approve the policy that they're putting forth. The other document in here, I think this is the right one, is and again, this would probably be like in a survey form, like SurveyMonkey or Forms, or if they need accessible documents for accommodation, they would be just on paper, or it could be a phone interview for all we know. But this would essentially be for public comment. So for example, if the commission staff wants to employ the allowed policy by the feds that we retain part of their admin fee costs as a fee, which means AmeriCorps would approve 5% of their grant for admin, but we could retain 1% of that for our internal costs and budget, which means they'd be operating on less admin, right? And so that has an impact to them. And so for that, it would be asking people, they could submit, the staff could send this out to community junior, to the grantees or whatnot, and say, like, what do you think about this? How would this impact you? Blah, 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 and get that feedback. And that would be transparent. That would be shared to the board, the commission board. And then this last document is, and that would help them answer the questions on the other thing that says, so did you find out for the people that this would impact, how it would impact them, if it was negative or positive, and what changes would you need to make? And then this is sort of like guiding questions for the commission discussion for approval. I threw this together ages ago, and I'm kind of bringing it forth now because I do want something in place, but I consider this high priority too, because I know that there are some things like the example I just gave that the staff would like to bring forth and are just waiting on some guidance to kind of figure out like how to do it. But I've looked at this for so long, I'm really seeking your input and expertise on what this would look like. Is this too long? Does this make sense? Are we asking the right questions? Those kinds of things. And because I consider that and the charter, I think, are kind of like the top ones to really like focus on first. How am I doing on time? I try to put together some, think through like what this would look like, right? Because we've got a bunch of different documents in there for review. And so what I was thinking is like these three policy documents, I think it's one of the ones that it doesn't go to the public policy committee, because this is a commission board like process and procedure. So it makes sense to be in this group. I think we could share it with public policy for their like feedback, but that's optional. Typically, and again, this is another process that needs to be developed, if we wanted to always give like the exec committee a review before it went to the full board, that would make sense. But in this case, there's not an executive committee meeting till like mid-August or something, or the beginning of August. And I think that's a really long time. I think it'd be great to focus on maybe the charter and the the policy equity one at the least to go to the July 11th commission meeting. And so in that sense, well, not the charter because I guess, well, I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts are. But at least for the policy procedures, I think being able to put that forth to the July 11th meeting would be great because if you think about it, the next meeting where then the well, okay, so if you put the policy to the July 11th, they could approve that with whatever recommendations, and then the staff would then be able to, like, at the September annual meeting, then present their policy requests. And that's really timely because those policy requests are gonna go into, like, our fall requests for applications and things like that. And they'll need to know whether they can implement some of those and give notice of those in the application process. And so for that one, that I see that as being a top priority, and that timing makes sense. For the others, I am suggesting that they be ready, as you see here, for like the executive committee on the 8th, if that seems doable enough. Um, and then they would all essentially be reviewed then and voted on in the September meeting, which has not been set yet. What are your thoughts on that? Does that seem doable? This is really based on your time and availability too, and what makes sense timing wise.
That seems doable to me based on my kind of cursory review of the documents. They seem like they're pretty strong as is, so I would be happy to make some time in the next couple of weeks to take a further look at it and send back any comments or feedback that I have along the lines of what you requested, Carrie.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What do you think, Carrie?
Yeah, I think it sounds doable. I definitely like put some time aside and go over that.
What do you think about the charter? Do you think does that we've kind of skipped ahead and been like, hey, we're saying like these are our responsibilities. We haven't fully shown you all the charter yet, but it feels like it goes to the exec committee, but like the exec committee would also give feedback during the full. So like, do you feel like that should go to August, or do you feel like we should work on that for July 11th too? So for July, or it could be for feedback. So like July 11th, we're saying we would want you to approve this like policy procedure with whatever like feedback and recommendations so that it can go into effect. But we could work on like just feedback of the committee charter for July 11th, or do you think that's necessary? What are your thoughts on that? Or how you've seen it on other boards that you're in, commissions that you're on? I kind of wish, like, I think the biggest thing here is that the executive committee is so far out, is the wrench in that, but leave as is for right now.
Just looking at the charter quickly.
The charter's in the Google
Gotcha.
Docs, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it does feel like it needs to go to the executive committee because it's like a committee and charter, and that, yeah, I mean, it feels that makes sense to me. I'm just wondering, like, would we want any feedback at the July 11th one for any reason? Just putting it out there, but we don't have to.
I mean, I'm happy to take a look at it and just see, and
Yeah.
if I have feedback, I'll have it available if you decide to bring it up at the meeting. Yeah.
So for this policy equity analysis procedure, which is actually 3 documents, put that on there just so we all remember. We would essentially need to have that ready to go out for the July 11th meeting, but by July 3rd, because we're closed on the 4th, it's a holiday. But we have to have the meetings, the materials go out the week before. So you'd just want to have your input to that by, let's look at the calendar really quick. Oops. So today's the 23rd. So essentially that's 2 work weeks. If by almost 11 days or so, 10 days. Would it be doable, do you think, for you to have your feedback in by the 2nd on that? And then I could, well, let's say, would it be doable to have that in by the 1st? And then that would give me like Wednesday, and I would kind of poke you all like, hey, I updated the drafts based on all your feedback. Like, are you cool for this, for us to send it out on the 3rd?
Yep,
Yeah,
that works for me.
Okay. Let me insert another column here. Like, let's call this the distribution deadline and call this the review deadline. So on this one, what did I just say? July 1st? We'll say that. And then like last look or something. Okay. That sounds good to me. And this is in the document, in the folder for everybody's reference. All right. Did I hit the how's our agenda look here? I think we did okay on this then. So action items, basically, yeah, we're gonna review these, send things in by this date, focus on that policy equity analysis just to start. I will have a few more drafts that I'll upload and then I'll add to this just so we can continue to have like an idea of kind of our timeline. But a couple of things we talked about was just maybe some processes down the road for both how we might handle like having youth members and then also a review process for applications and whatnot. We also all agreed to utilize the draft message to do some kind of blanket outreach to some of our connections and then submit some ideas for some more targeted recruitment as we go, probably focusing a little bit more on that September due date. I'll update the spreadsheet so there's a better way for us to track that. And then Jared, you had mentioned that you would reach out to your connections to see if they had any best practices or documents for like how they're handling youth membership on a commission or a board. And Carrie, you had some good ideas for in particular, some targeted recruitment for the disadvantaged youth services provider position. Am I missing anything? I think that's all of our action items.
I think you got it all.
All right. Oh,
Wow.
I went 1 minute over. I apologize. I'm gonna drag down at the beginning there, but wrapped it all up. Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts or questions or concerns or anything else you'd like to share? Personal announcements.
I think that's it. You have a very good memory for remembering all of that stuff. I would have forgot.
I try. I do have I have my little digital notebook that I'm writing notes on
Oh,
as
perfect.
I'm going over here. I also though have my fountain pen sitting here and I almost tried to write on my digital notebook with that. So I need to like separate these things better.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I sit here with my pen too and I go like this and I'm like I'm sure people think I'm gonna write on myself, but it's just a stylus.
I did with my iPad and I have my Apple Pencil and I just
Right? And people think
all
you're
my
getting ready
notes,
to like
everything.
scribble
Yeah.
and like, yeah, it's a stylus. But yeah, I think that covered everything. And I will if I am adding something in here, I'll make sure to like at you all in here so that it's not a surprise, so that you get a little message that's saying like, hey, Carrie, asked you a question or put a new doc in here or something, so that I'm not hoping you're just stumbling upon it. But I think we have a really good start on kind of getting caught up with some of this. We have a lot of other stuff, but I don't want to overwhelm you all too. With some various other kind of development stuff for member roles and stuff like that, we can take a look at. But this is what kind of stood out to me to be more timely as of right now, and also really like leading us into like that September annual retreat. So I think we're in a good spot. All right, well, meeting adjourned.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Carrie.
much.
Have a good week.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.